I'm Scott Flowers with Cloud Ninjas. Today we're here to talk about the ASUS RS500A-E12-RS4U. Let's get going. Hey, thanks for stopping by today. It's a little bit more about the ASUS RS500A-E12-RS4U. Do us a favor if you find anything that helps you in this video, click that like and smash that subscribe. All right, so what we're going to do in this video, we're going to do a good overview. We're going to cover CPUs, RAM, drives, network cards, RAID, power supply, supported operating systems, plus a bunch more. So hey, let's just go ahead and hop into the good stuff. All right, let's start with the most important feature, which is the CPU. It's going to be one CPU socket. It's an SP5 socket, which means it takes AMD Genoa Zen 4 9004 series, so you're going to have a bunch of great processors in there, and that might be what led you to check out this system in the first place, is you're trying to find the right AMD Genoa system for you. And if that's the case, hey, do drop us a line at sales@cloudninjas.com. We'd love to help you in your journey to find the right Genoa, and this is definitely a good chassis for that, and we'll get to some of the reasons why as we come up here in a second, but that's could be the reason why you're watching this video in the first place. So that being said, again, one CPU, AMD Genoa 9004 series. There's a bunch of great procs in the series, and we get asked all the time, what do you recommend? What procs do you like? That depends on your application and your budget. So we break down into three categories. We have our low end, our value, and our high end. The low end is going to be your good budget-friendly procs, but they're not going to be the most robust specs, but can be great for whatever application you're using for, especially if you don't need the most robust specs. You're going to have your value, which is going to be your in-between, which is going to be more expensive than the low end, and it's going to be cheaper than the high end, but it's not going to be breaking the bank, but it's still going to be good specs, right? Whereas you have the high end, it's just going to be the top of the line, the best processors that you can use, and there's a couple of good ones that I personally like. There's the 9654, which is a wonderful 96-core proc, and a 9754, which is a 128-core proc, which honestly kind of blows my mind a little bit when I hear 128 core proc, because putting a 128 core proc into a box nowadays is just insane. That's one CPU, and back in the day, I remember when we could put 220 cores in, and I was just like, this is awesome. And now you can just put in one 128 core EPYC, and that's to me, again, the performance that you're going to get out of this is just going to be monstrous, and it's a great system, specifically based off of the processor. That brings us to RAM. It takes DDR5 memory. There are 24 DIMM slots inside, and I want to stop right there and highlight that, because again, you might be watching a bunch of our different Genoa videos and trying to figure out which is the right choice for me. That is one of the great features of this. 24 DIMM slots inside. That's one of the downfall on some of the ASRock chassis out there, is there's only 8 DIMM slots inside. And so I talk about that scalability of wanting to go past just 512 or 768 gigabyte, and you might need to use a terabyte of RAM. If you do, the ASRock's become very tough choices, because the 128 gig DIMMs are just so expensive on a price per gigabyte. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but that is one of the features I definitely wanted to highlight here, is the 24 DIMM slots is great for if you want to continue to upgrade in the future. You might only start with 512, but you got to think down the line. And if you think you might ever get to 1 terabyte, then I would definitely go with the 24 DIMM slot options that are out there. There's some other options that are more DIMM slots than the 8 from the ASRock, but again, one of the good features here. So, all right, now that brings us to speed. You can use 4800 or 5600. What sizes can you use? 16 gig, 32 gig, 48 gig, 64 gig, 96 gig, 128 gig, 256 gig, or all the way up to 512 gigabytes. So yes, there's a lot of different sizes that you can use for this machine. To me, 64 gigabytes is kind of the sweet spot, because the scalability and the price point is still really good. That jump from 64 gig and 96 gig up to 128 gig is really where it gets expensive, and that's where I like to build with the 64 gig, 96 gig, 32 gig, 48 gig. Those right there are all a great sweet spot, and if you come to us for builds, that's what we would recommend. And again, depending on what you want, but most likely that's what we would recommend. So, all right, what types of RAM can we use? Well, there's ECC Registered, known as an RDIMM, and then they have the ECC Registered 3DSs, all right? So essentially you're going to be using ECC Registered DDR5 memory for this box. All right, so the max that you can use is going to be 3 terabytes with traditional RDIMMs, which is going to be 24 128 gigabytes. And when you're using the 4800 speed, do note that with single rank modules, it's going to still clock down to 4000, and with dual rank modules, it's going to clock down to 3600 speed. So that's going to be the max. Now, if you're using the 3DS modules, you can actually get up to 6 terabytes, but you can only use 12 DIMMs using 512 gigabyte modules. And again, it's going to clock down to 3600 speed. So those are going to be the overall maxes that you can put into this box. All right, let's talk storage. This is a 4-bay large form factor chassis, but the way that the trays are set up, you can put in 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drives, which means there are 5 types of drives that you can put in here because it is tri-mode. So that means you can put in NVMe SSDs, SATA SSDs, SAS SSDs, SATA hard drives, or SAS hard drives. So those are going to be your 5 choices. Now, before we get too deep into this, I do want to note with the SAS drives, the solid state or hard drive, you do need to have a RAID controller and you need to have the extra cabling. So that's going to be important for your SAS drives. And that's not what I personally lean to, but if that is what you're using, do note that going into it. So my personal favorite right now, it depends on what you're doing. If you want storage, the SATA the SATA hard drives are a great option. The speed's going to be a little bit lower than the SAS, so that might be when you do need the RAID controller. But my personal favorite is NVMe. NVMe is the fastest and the cheapest among the SSDs right now, and has the most scalability. So if you're using SSDs, NVMe is definitely the way to go. If you're going storage, then I could see the debate between SATA and SAS, just because SAS is going to be faster, but then you have to get into the whole RAID card situation, which isn't terrible, but that's where I'm going. So all right, let's get into all the specs. So for NVMe SSDs, you get 30.72 terabytes per port. So you can put in 4 of those. That's going to be great scalability as a whole, and actually the highest scalability that you can get. It's going to be 16 gigabit per second. And again, NVMe is actually cheaper than SATA or SAS SSDs right now, which is kind of crazy because they've always been more expensive, but right now they're actually at a better price point. And I should note that you can use PCIe 5.0, or you can go back to 4.0, which means you can use U.2 or U.3 inside these. But if you are using the 4.0, it's going to go to the slower speed. So the advantage of the 5.0 is just that it's going to be faster. You get the 5.0 speed. So all right, now with the SATA SSDs, you're going to get 7.68 terabytes is the max. So it's going to be lesser scalability and only 6 gigabit per second. So kind of womp womp. It's going to cost more. It's slower and less scalability. If you got them laying around because you've used them in other machines, then it's not a terrible idea by any means. I got nothing against the SATA drives, but when I compare it to NVMe, it's losing on all fronts, right? And then you got the SAS SSDs, and that's going to be 15.36, so it's going to be lower scalability than the NVMe. It's 12 gigabit per second, which is going to be lower speed than the NVMe, and it's going to cost more. So I always go back to the NVMe on the SSDs. I'm a big fan of those right now. It's the fastest, best performing, and the cheapest. I mean, that's just such a winner, right? Now, again, if you want storage, then you can put in some 3.5-inch SATA or SAS hard drives. You're going to get, on the SATA side, 24 terabytes and 24 terabytes on the SAS side. But for the SATA, you get 7.2K RPM. So, it's going to be slower. SAS, you can get 7.2K. 10K or 15K, but when you get to some of the higher speeds, you don't always get the higher sizes, you don't always get the higher speeds. You sometimes still have to settle for 7.2K, but that's what you're going to get. So one last good thing to point out, there are 2 M.2s. These are going to be 2280 or 22110. You can put up to 4 terabytes per. It's going to be PCIe 4.0. We're a big fan of using some of the 990s. You could drop those in for relatively cheap price points. And again, you get up to 4 terabytes too, and these are great for boot drives. Let's talk RAID. So RAID's a whole barrel of worms. I'll let you guys fight about in the comment section. What we'll do here is we're going to drop up a list of compatible cards. This is mainly LSI. These are all approved on the spec sheet, but you can put in other RAID cards. Let's be honest, this is just what the manufacturer has validated. There's always other RAID cards. And hey, if there's stuff that you like, again, drop a comment down below, especially if there's a big NVMe card you like. Everyone would love to hear about it. So these are the RAID options, and here's a chart that will hopefully be helpful for you to make the selection of the type of RAID you want if you need a RAID card. All right, let's chat about network cards and network options. This is one of the areas that, again, I'm a big fan of what they have going on for this ASUS chassis here. So first off, the onboard stuff isn't outstanding, but there's 3 onboard ports. One of them is going to be your IPMI management port, so that's going to be your dedicated port. Then you're going to have 2 1 gigabit RJ45. Womp womp. Those aren't great. You're probably not even going to really use those, but those are available and on board. What's really good about this system compared to some of the other Genoas that are out there, there are 3 PCIe slots that are by 16, so you could drop in 3 PCIe network cards and there's an OCP 3.0. So theoretically, you could put in 4 additional network cards. That makes this a big win over some of the competitors like ASRock, who are having 1 PCIe slot. They do have the dual 10 gigs built in on some of the ASRocks, but there's 1 PCIe slots on some of the competition that compares to this. So that is one of the big advantages, is more network options for this ASUS. What interfaces can you use? You can use RJ45, which is just another way of saying Ethernet, which is the most common. You can use SFP, SFP+, QSFP, QSFP56, also SFP28. So yeah, there's a bunch of them that you can use as a whole. So those are going to be your interfaces. What speeds can you use? Let's talk speeds. You can put in 1 gigabit, 10, 25, 50, 100, 200, or all the way up to 400. So yes, there's some very fast speeds that you can throw inside. Let's talk power supplies. You can put in 2 hot swap redundant power supplies. You can put in 2 800 watts or 2 1600 watts. Just make sure they are the same. Not much going on with power supplies. And last but not least, let's talk about supported operating systems. So you're going to have some of the traditional main popular ones, which can be Windows Server 2019, 2022, VMware ESXi 8.0, and the new versions of it. And then you're going to have Red Hat and Ubuntu, and there's other supported operating systems out there as well, but that's what is listed as far as according to ASUS. And hey, if you made it this far, do us a favor, click that like and smash that subscribe. And if you're looking for any custom-built Genoa or any other service for that matter, we would love the opportunity to earn your data center's business. Please email us at sales@cloudninja.com. Thanks for stopping by, guys. Take care.